Marketer of the Day, episode 651. Rise together to find leadership within your organization. Strategic clarity, accountability, and systems, governance, and rivalry control with Ron Carucci.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We have return guest Ron Carucci on the show. And if you're curious or you listen to Ron and I's conversation today and you want to hear more from him, his past appearance was over at marketeroftheday.com/388. And Ron is all about transformational change, building a company culture, leadership, all that fun stuff. So we're going to dive in and see what happens. How are things lately, Ron?
Robert, hey, great to talk to you again, my friend. Things are really well.
Awesome. Well, glad to hear it. So just to get everyone caught up, can you just tell us real quick, what are you all about and where's your website?
Yeah, so come hang out with us at Navalent, Navalent.com. We've got all kinds of great material, content, videos, white papers, some free ebooks on all things strategy, organization, and leadership, the messy stuff of the workplace, where who I want to be and how I organize my work and how I show up to lead all converge together in some often messy form and require us to sort things out and do things that sometimes are hard.
Yeah, and sometimes messy is good, right? Sometimes the chaos is the only way forward and to get us to where we need to go. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll make some plans or I'll want things to be perfect. And it seems to me like perfect equals not getting done, right? Perfect means it's staying in imaginary land and we're not making progress.
I think we have placed way too much emphasis on levels of perfection that are just not possible. I mean, sure. Do I want perfection for my heart surgeon? Absolutely. Do I want perfection in my accounting? Yes. But I don't need levels of quality. I mean, we've told everybody that because you can do it perfectly, you should. And that's a great excuse not to do anything well. So I think we all need to learn how to embrace the mess of being imperfect human beings in an imperfect world and learn a little bit more about grace and kindness in the midst of being imperfect.
Amen to that. I don't want to get held up by just overthinking things. So along those lines, it's been a couple of years. So what, in the names of imperfection, what sort of stuff have you been overcoming? What sorts of imperfection and taking massive action, all that has been happening with you lately?
Well, so we have some brand new research out that the ink is still drying on, sort of building on our 10-year longitudinal study that we talked about last time. It's now our 15-year study on one of the greatest imperfections in humanity, lying.
Interesting.
And what is it inside an organization or a community that will predict whether or not someone will lie or withhold the truth? And it's been stunning research. We've already published the research in HBR, and now we're working on a book. And it's kind of scary, Robert, that it's not just that people show up at work today thinking, how can I deceive people? It's that organizations are doing things unwittingly that give people no other choice but to lie. And so our hope is that we can, stem the tide on. We just don't need to hear any more Theranos, Wells Fargo, Volkswagen stories, right? And the origin seeds of those travesties were sown so many years earlier. And so if we can understand the kinds of conditions which we create that encourage people to be untruthful, maybe we can stem the tide much earlier.
So when you mention things like a Wells Fargo, what comes to mind is there was that debacle a few years ago where they kept opening multiple accounts for people. They'd open 8 checking accounts that people didn't know about, and they'd get hit with all sorts of fees like that. And so is that the sort of stuff we're talking about, where there's maybe a dysfunctional system and things start innocently enough and the ethical lines get pushed and pushed until next thing you know, there's this really bad end result?
That's exactly what we're talking about, Robert. That's exactly what we're talking about. And it starts out with, in that case, a very unclear strategy, a very unclear sense of who we say we are as a mission versus what we're actually reinforcing. Decision-making processes that were not clear. Excessive rewarding structures and goal structures, and a very competitive work environment. But it was over 5,000 people, opening up those accounts at Wells Fargo. They all did not wake up one morning on the same day and say, "Hey, here's an idea." And so, but we remember the story for the moment they got caught, right? From the moment that we started to smell fire and smoke. And then it happened again to them 2 years later with insurance products. So that corruption was baked deeply into that otherwise beloved, iconic brand. And while it was happening in 2017, they were the 7th most admired company in America. They were the 12th most highest reputation company on Barron's. So you can have stage 4 cancer while you're running a marathon, and it looks very pretty. But if you don't look deep inside to see where the cracks in your organization are, to see the conditions that you set up systemically that may be encouraging people to lie or withhold the truth, you find yourself on the cover of newspapers and headlines and stories you never dreamed you'd be in.
So you're saying that a lot of this comes from unclear strategy. And then when you're mentioning here about there's the cracks in the organizations, it seems to me that there's just this need for the re-examination again and again, or maybe something else. So what do you think causes this, and what's the solution?
So we found 4 repeatable predictors. The first one was strategic clarity, right? So if I have a mission statement, a vision statement, a strategy statement that says who I am, a statement of my identity, but my actions belie that statement, or worse, there's confusion about that within my organization or in my marketplace. I have 20 versions of it. You go around any leadership team in any company and ask what the strategy is, you get 20 different answers. When that dilution factor is there, you're 3 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. Accountability systems. So when people perceive that the way my contribution is measured, not rewarded or compensated, but measured, in other words, is the way I'm contributing being assessed accurately. If I feel it's unfair or unjust, you're 4 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. Because now I have to embellish my accomplishments and I have to lie about my mistakes. If my governance, so if the way decision making happens is not transparent, if I have to rely on the underground rumor mill to get information because the truth can't be told in public, the truth can't be explored in a healthy governing mechanism, then you're 3 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. And if you have rivalry, so if you have cross-functional conflict that's unresolved, if you have border wars between sales and marketing, between R&D and operations, between HR and everybody, you're 6 times more likely to have people lie or withhold the truth. Because when we fragment the organization, we fragment the truth when we create dueling truths. So, and it's cumulative. So if you have all those conditions in place, that makes you 16 times more susceptible to dishonest behavior.
All these factors working against you. So just to make sure I got all these 4 right, we have number 1, strategic clarity, which means that there's confusion. There might be 20 different versions of the mission statement and things like that. Number 2, lack of accountability systems. So maybe things are measured in what people think as an unfair way. Bad governance, where people might have to get their news from the underground rumor mill and these kind of backdoor ways. And number 4, rivalry, where we have these different dueling truths and it's kind of cutthroat and everyone's trying to get ahead.
That you nailed it, Robert. You nailed it. Yep.
Well, and you're mentioning all this, and what comes to mind is something that a friend told me just last week, which was like there's your thoughts and your words and your actions, and it's like if your thoughts, words, and actions all match up, then you're being ethical, then you're being truthful. But if you're thinking one thing and saying something else, or you're doing something else, then that's where it breaks. That's where you're unethical. So you could have someone who's on death row who's ethical, but then a lawyer who's free who's not ethical because those things don't match up. And what really struck me as far as like kind of thinking that about that and unpacking that is that there's in that whole thing with the thoughts, words, and actions not lining up. Sometimes we lie to ourselves, right? Like you think of lying sometimes as, well, I think this, but then I tell something to someone else. But sometimes we can lie to ourselves and be like delusional and just be completely working against our own self-interest. And it seems like in our conversation today, when you're talking about an organization and multiple people and multiple moving parts, like it might kind of be its own living beast on its own, right? It's like, it's one thing for us to say, okay, I'm a person and I'll figure out my own ethics. But when you have all these departments and people and things doing their thing, it's like, it's its own living organism, right?
It totally is, Robert. And self-deception is sometimes a survival mechanism, right? Sometimes I have to convince myself of a different truth just to survive. And so we start, we all have the capacity to mitigate the stories we tell ourselves in our head, but when we don't, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and others suddenly become true. And then I start acting upon them as if they are true. And that you have these dueling narratives in the organization, or dueling false truths that really make things very complicated. And we can all feel it. We all walk into meetings where we know nobody's saying the truth or nobody's speaking their mind. We walk and get through the hallways of organizations and we see sideway hallway whispering. Well, why does it have to happen that way? So we can sense when we're in an environment where it's completely inauthentic and we know the last thing people are speaking is the truth. And so now to survive that environment, I'm going to be compromising my own sense of integrity. I've got to justify that some way. So the lie I have to tell myself is why I think it's okay. Everybody else is doing it, or it wasn't that bad, or nobody got hurt. And so that self monologue in my head is purely a way for me to endure the environment that, if I were honest with myself, I would acknowledge that I really can't stand.
Sounds to me like just survival, just getting by one more day, and it sounds pretty exhausting too. When you're talking about playing politics, I imagine some people are just thinking, I just want to go to work, I just want to get my tasks done, and here I am trying to please this person and keep that person at bay in light of that person. I mean, it seems like such a toxic downhill spiral, and it sounds like just like a way to get stressed and die early.
Well, it definitely is, and sadly, we stay in those kinds of environments too long, right? We sort of inadvertently get numb and we quit and stay instead of quitting and leaving. But then the sad part about that, Robert, is that we wake up when we're 35 or 40 years old and suddenly realize, my gosh, where did the last 10 years of my life go, and why did I give it to this place?
I mean, and that's a real scary place to be. And so you're doing all this research, and so what has me wondering is how did you get to the bottom of some of this? Because with all the backstabbing and all the lying, how did you get to the truth with some of this bad stuff happening?
Well, so we had 3,300 interviews across a 15-year period that we examined. So we had some great artificial intelligence, that helped us read and examine the patterns and statistically analyze the probabilities of what we saw. I mean, artificial intelligence these days is a pretty scary tool, but it's powerful in that it actually reads this data and content in a way that can produce, over a 15-year period of time, it produced some great insights.
And so is there a way out of this? Like with all this, these 3,300 interviews, 15 years, artificial intelligence, it sounds like you guys have really been putting a microscope to this. Do you have any interesting stories where you went to some organization and you figured out what was going wrong and you corrected the ship?
Absolutely. There are ways you can articulate a strategy and an identity and actually align to it, right? So you can narrow your focus, be who you say you are, and make sure that people's individual sense of purpose is findable in your purpose, right? So when they come to work, they see themselves in the story. Make your accountability systems just. Make leaders hold people accountable to contributions and commitments they make, and talk about them honestly, in fairness and in truth. Design your governance structure to make sure the right information and the right decisions are being made in a transparent, clear way, and explain it to people. And when there's border wars, resolve them. When there's unresolved conflict, bring people together and make them talk about how we're going to navigate this border, how we're going to stitch the seam between our functions or between our worlds so that we're allies instead of adversaries. So it's all really fixable stuff if you actually invest the time to attend to it. But it's when you let it go or ignore it that you eventually, find really, really toxic stuff happening.
So it seems like you're saying that just acknowledging the problem early and taking some action early just to get people talking seems to be half the battle. And you always hear about all the sort of cheesy business stuff, right? Like having the mission statement or having the company culture or like making sure everyone's happy. But why make it more complicated than that, right? And why why just downplay that and then just let things go whichever way they go, and then wonder why they ended up in a place that you don't want to go? Well, it's because you weren't proactive about it, right? You didn't have the strategy. You weren't making sure that everything was running smoothly. And so you said that you fix this problem quite a bit. Is there one particular like organization or story that really sticks out as far as really hammering the point home and making us all understand like what can be done here?
Well, I think the reality is that you know, a lot of those mechanisms, it's not bad to have a mission statement. It's not bad to have value statements. We're going to have some type of performance management process, right? So these are parts of life. It's what you do with them and how you allow them to be embodied. That's really what's critical. So we put these mechanisms in place. We all go to meetings and we hate them, right? So the stuff of governance and accountability and cross-functional collaboration and strategic identity are already in place. The question is, are they really doing what you want them to do, or are you just convincing yourself that they're doing something you think they're doing when they're really not? And so the question to start with is, let me go examine them. Let me understand, are they producing the results I want them to? Are they having the impact I hope they have? And if they're not, how can I make them better? So we've swung the pendulum, for example, in the complete opposite direction on performance management. Performance management hasn't worked for decades, so now companies have just stopped doing it. Well, that's stupid, because people need to talk about their contributions. People need feedback. People need to be acknowledged for the work they're doing, and they need to be told when they're falling short. The problem is you can't do that as an annual event, right? At the core of accountability is the intimate relationship between a leader and her followers. The accoutrement to document that stuff is just the stuff. But if at the core of that of what accountability really means is not a relationship where we can be honest about what I did, honest about what I didn't do, honest about where I fell short and how I can improve, and honest about why you believe I belong here and what I contribute matters, then who cares about how you write it down, or what ranking you give people, or what box you put them in, or what slates you put them on, all of that stuff, or what awards you give them. All of that stuff just covers up, or tries to sort of do the sleight of hand deflection from the fact that my relationship with my boss sucks.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing from you saying all this is that it's important to think about like not just ignoring some of this like accountability performance stuff, and not just going through the motions or not getting fixated on the details, but focus on what's the point, right? What's it trying to get you? And if people in the past have been frustrated with some of these things, or they haven't taken it seriously, well, then don't just throw it all out, but re-examine it and redo it in a way that gets the result you want, which in this case is make people excited, make people valued, make everyone pulling the rope in the same direction, right?
Exactly.
Cool. And so as far as people kind of getting back on track or making sure that you don't end up with like a Wells Fargo or a BP or something where people aren't getting along, or there's almost like some evil actions at work, like where do you see people getting stuck if they hear some of this stuff and they say, okay, well, I need to maybe get back to the basics and re-examine some of this stuff? Where do people get stuck just along the way of getting things working again?
Well, the first thing they get stuck on is continue to perpetuate an illusion, right? So let's refresh our values. Let's refresh our mission statement. Let's change the categories on the performance management process. Let's do meeting technique and have better agendas and better meeting. Oh, we'll do stand-up meetings. So they try and impose superficial solutions over the problem, rather than rooting out the real problem. So they get stuck because they try and put Band-Aids on major surgery, rather than stepping back and asking the honest question about, why do people not understand who we are? Why do people roll their eyes when they see our values? Why does our mission statement sound cosmetic? Why is our employee engagement score so low? So look at the signals for what they are, and look at the mechanisms that are really causing the behavior you want changed, and then be honest about what it's going to really take to change, and stop looking for the quick fix.
I like it. So you're saying ask a lot of these why questions, and it also seems in these why questions that you're listing, it's focused on the people, not the stuff, right? Not the system. It's not well, should the meetings be stand up or sit down, or should the font on the agendas be better? You're like, well, why do people roll their eyes, right? Why is there these emotions? And once you get the why, then take a step back and then look at the mechanics and then be honest about what needs to change. That seems like a way better way of going about it than either option number one, doing nothing and just letting whatever happens, which isn't good. Option number two, that keeps coming up in our conversation here, which is just throw everything out and say, well, I tried, it's just not working. And then option number three is to try the quick fixes and try the band-aids, which either you say, well, the quick fix didn't work, or maybe it appeared to work, but then things behind the scenes aren't working. So you're saying you need to root out the real problem and not be in such a hurry, and know that there might be some kind of growing pains, some kind of patience. And I'm just hearing a lot of, keep things simple and do the right thing, and don't try to just add all the complexity and add all the stuff and hoping that it's work. I mean, it like naturally all the complexity's been in there. Maybe it's time to just like strip things away and get back to basics here.
Absolutely.
All right. So we mentioned that their website is Navalent.com. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And also maybe tell people, like, is there a course, a book, a coaching program, or some other way that if people say, this Ron guy, I think he can really help me, I want to reach out to him and contact him and get this conversation going, where can people get more help from you and your organization towards fixing some of these problems?
So a couple of options. So Navalent, Navalent.com is the place you can come and find a lot of great content. We have a free ebook. So if you have a significant amount of change you have to lead in your organizations, we have a free ebook called Leading Transformation. You can find at Navalent.com/transformation. If you're a leader and you're rising up in your organization and you're looking to assume a broader perch or have a bigger impact, and you're headed for that vice president job one day, we have a great cohort called Rising Together. And it's a specially selected cohort of a small number of people we take on a year-long journey to help prepare them for that broader perch so that they can succeed. And you can come find that on our homepage. Look for the Rising Together cohort under leadership. And you can find the information about the cohort when the next one starts, which is we're taking applications now through the fall, and it will start at the end of this year. Again, there's only 12 spots, so lots of applications. So apply early. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So if you want to continue to engage with ideas and content that I'm sharing, love to do that. Stay in touch.
Fantastic. Lots of good stuff. And what I'm hearing from you as we're winding down here, Ron, is that people don't have to go it alone, right? People don't have to guess. People don't have to have the weight on their shoulders of all these things going wrong around them. And so if people are trying to fix that organization, or if there's a rising star in that organization, they don't necessarily have to figure it out as they go along. They can get advice from people who've been there before, who know what to expect. And maybe Navalent can be people's secret weapon as far as reading those articles and seeing all that free content on the strategy and the leadership. It can be people's secret weapon as far as grabbing that free ebook at Navalent.com/transformation, or even joining that Rising Together cohort of 12 people, or at the very least, just adding you on LinkedIn and Twitter. That's Ron Carucci. That way people have the additional knowledge, right? There's no downside in getting some outside opinions or getting some extra facts. So that way we don't all have to reinvent the wheel every day, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, none of us can go it alone, right? We all need help. Listen, I'm 30 years into my career and I have a coach. So we all need somebody to help us along the way. And why would you want to go it alone when you can have help?
Right. Seems like the more logical and less stressful and less work way to do it, like a more smarter strategy. So the place for everyone to go right now is Navalent.com. That's Navalent.com. And we'll see you there. And thanks so much, Ron, for making a return visit and dazzling us with your wisdom and your brilliance here.
Robert, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
Subscribe to us right now while it's still fresh on your mind at marketeroftheday.com/iTunes.